Okay, so we are back, and today I'm going to give you a little overview about the PC that we're giving away. Today, in fact, as the competition is now closed, I'll reveal the winner in this video as well. So this past week I've been checking out how the Warlock gaming PC performed, and the results are pretty surprising, actually. While for sure this is obviously more of a mid-level or even an entry build, its performance really was solid, as I'll talk about and show you shortly. First up though, a big thanks to everyone who entered. We ended up with over 15,000 entries total, and of course a big thanks to MSI and CCL for providing and organising this setup. If you're interested in this build or any of the components, I've set up all the links down below this video. A reminder on the spec of this giveaway Warlock CCL PC build. It's got an Intel Core i5 6-core CPU with a base of 3 GHz up to 4.1 GHz. It's running with 2 sticks of 8GB HyperX Fury RAM, giving you 16 there total. Graphics card is an MSI GTX 1060 6GB OCV1 card, and all this is going to be mounted on the MSI B360 Gaming Plus motherboard. The liquid cooler for the CPU is a Cooler Master Master Liquid ML240L RGB. It's all powered by the Cooler Master 650W 80 Plus bronze, and you've got a Kingston M2 240GB drive mounted on the motherboard there, which is very fast indeed for booting the system and so on, and a 2TB standard drive in the lower part of the system for storing all of those games in there. The case is an NZXT S340 Black Red ATX mid tower as well. Then of course, remembering that MSI have also contributed to this build a GK40 keyboard, a GH60 headset, a GM40 gaming mouse. I've reviewed these before, so that video is going to be linked here at the end of this video, but they also contributed a curved monitor to this build, giving us the MAG 241C monitor. So a really big thanks to MSI, because they contributed a ton to this build and made it really a fully complete build, not just the rig itself, which I think you'll agree is a much more satisfying thing to win a whole setup. So if we're talking about winning the entire setup, we should probably go ahead and announce the winner for the setup, and that winner is Ben H from Nottingham. I'm not going to give his full name, obviously. Big thanks to all of you guys who entered into the competition. As I say, 15,000, over 15,000, nearly 16,000 total entries. If Ben doesn't get back to me for some reason, then I will re-roll possibility of somebody else to win there. But sorry to all those people who obviously didn't get there, but it's as it goes with so many entries. You know how it's going to be. But thanks to your support as always with the videos and with the channel. There's going to be more opportunities in the future, probably some opportunities for some global giveaways as well. So let's get on and look at the benchmarking, look at how I got on using this system in the last week. As you guys know, I'm not a tech channel. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a breakdown of my overall impression of the system as I've been running it this week. I've had plenty of gaming sessions on it, and I tried it out with single player games like the new Shadow of the Tomb Raider game, because I've been playing that on my own system as well, so it's a good comparison to make. Also Alien Isolation, RTS like Total War Attila, and also Total War Warhammer 2. I benchmarked Dawn of War 2 in there as well, and then of course I got some BF4 on there, played a bit of Overwatch as well. Short answer is, it was pretty much barely ever hitting below 60 frames. As I say, with any frame rates, things are going to go up and down depending on your situation, but on average it was performing really well, punching well within its weight. I mean, it really did surprisingly well. For seriously an i5 and 1060, this thing was not a million miles away from my own rig, because right now I'm running a 1070 and an i7 6700K CPU, so I've got more RAM in there as well, but basically my system is only a step up from this one. And yeah, I'm looking to upgrade my own rig in this next year, but honestly, still runs most things really well since I've had it, because I've had it for a few years now, and I haven't really felt rushed to upgrade it because my system still handles everything really well. Anyway, the bottom line is that this little PC, and it is small as well, it's only about a third smaller than my current case, and it really performs. I remember this rig was coming in at about 1,100 quid. That's roughly $1,400 or 1,200 euros. It looks really smart, and especially I have to say the Cooler Master Master Liquid ML240L. That thing is incredibly sexy. The RGB fans look really good, and I actually even like the braided finish with the pipes there. You've also got the Cooler Master logo lit in there as well. It looks especially good with the system's red signature, and you've got that as well in the case, and you've also got that on the B360 motherboard, the whole red finish. So this whole kind of like red feel that's going with it, I mean, it's such an MSI build as well, because it's so black and red all over, right? Also, let's talk about the peripherals a little bit. As I said on my previous overview, I really do like the MSI GM40 as well. It's the mouse. It's a really comfortable mouse that feels really accurate and direct, and I'm pretty finicky when it comes to mice. You know, there's a whole series which I don't like at all. There's a very popular series that I don't like at all, so I'm quite funny when it comes to mice. But with this one, I actually really enjoyed it. But the thing that's most surprising about the GM40, and like I say, if you watch my overview, I go into a bit more depth about kind of how I feel about it. But the GM40 mouse, it's not expensive. I mean, it's 35 quid. Potentially it could do with a little bit more weight to it, but overall, yeah, I mean, for the money, it's really, really nice. I think as I said in my actual review, this mouse feels about as good as those that I paid double for. Now, MSI also contributed the GK40 keyboard, and this is basically the very budget version of the GK80 keyboard that I currently use. Now, the GK40 comes in at about £40, and the GK80 comes in at about £150, so I think you can obviously expect there's going to be quite a difference in style and overall feel, and this is absolutely correct. It's a budget keyboard, no doubt. However, I used it through this week when I was testing it on that system, and it's fine. It's comfortable, the keys are responsive, and again, ergonomic to use, but not mechanical. I think, as I've said before, if you want to get the good quality, you've really got to step up to those higher level models. And I think, as I said when I was talking about the GK80, in the past, I never really sort of put too much in but the GK80 actually really turned me around on that. I really think it's worth it, personally. The quality you get from the higher boards is very, very worthwhile. However, does that mean with something like the GK40, the lower spec one, that you're going to be unsatisfied or even having a frustrating time? Not at all. Look, I mean, it's money. It doesn't have the same style to it that the higher sibling has to it, nor is it quite as flashy. But as with the theme of this build, it performs its core purpose well enough. It's not showy for sure, even with its mandatory RGB there. The wrist rest as well makes it more comfortable, but the cons, well, like I say, it's not a mechanical keyboard, and you do notice this with the feel of it, absolutely. MSI have tried to make it feel more like a mechanical keyboard, but it's not a mechanical keyboard. But, you know, like I say, it's 40 quid, so calm down, alright? Now, the MSI Mag241C monitor as well. Now, I recently reviewed another monitor by MSI, and actually, of course, because this one, you know, for a 1080 monitor, it's going to be different than the 1440 that I was looking at before. For a 1080 monitor, I was expecting to suddenly be shocked by the drop in quality, you know, because I use a 440, I wouldn't use anything less than that really. But actually, I was pretty surprised, not so much. You know, you can tell it's a 1080 monitor, but it didn't reach out and like punch me in the face. It looked pretty tidy, and for, again, within this budget build, a monitor that's costing you just over £200, especially when you consider it's got the all-important 144Hz refresh rate and 1 millisecond response, it's fine by me. The colors as well and general tones throughout were good solid blacks in there. So yeah, I was happy with it. It was fine, and again, within the remit of this build, I think it sits within that in terms of the budget spec for this. So this PC build, it looks good, it performs well, and it does what it says on the tin. So where's the cons, Luton? Yep, look, for sure, I can pick out some little gripes if you want them, and important, please, to remember that, as I've said already, this is more of a budget mid-level build of a PC, so, of course, if you want to just upgrade things, yeah, of course, you can find some extra performance there. You know, you could put some RAM in there, you could add an SSD, you could have a different CPU, different GPU, whatever you want to do there, of course, but we're looking at this specific build, and within its budget, I have to say, I've got very little to criticize here, and that's actually surprising because often I can find some things pretty easily, but for me, this thing really actually delivered more than I expected. Most of my nitpicks are just things like I would have preferred to have the top-mounted USB ports on the front of the panel. I'm not a fan of having them on the top. I don't like that position, but honestly, that's so subjective. It really depends on how you want to position your rig in your room. If you're going to have it lower down, then maybe that's going to be beneficial. That's not how I would prefer to, but even then, that's not how I prefer to have it. One other thing, again, and it's really pretty minor, with the 1060 GPU, it's a shame it doesn't have a back plate on it. My 1070 and obviously the 1080s, they've got some very nice back plates on the GPUs, and not having one there somehow makes the GPU, it looks and it feels more exposed, naked, if you will. But again, you know, price difference there, 1060 to the 1070s, 1080s, so you're obviously getting those extras with the higher models. Quite honestly, beyond that, not really, I don't have that much to really criticize. It's pretty surprising, because before I had the system delivered, I was actually thinking, and I hold my hands up here, that this little PC was not going to be much good, comparatively speaking. But you know, within the scheme and realm of what you're going to be paying for a gaming PC, I think this one shows you don't need to break the bank to deliver a PC that can handle a really solid array of games. The benchmarks for Total Warhammer 2 really surprised me, as I'll show you, and Total War games in general I think are good to look at. They've got such a high amount of action going on screen, it's always a lot for the system to handle, so it's good to look at that. And like I say, on most of these benchmarks I was running it at high quality. With Tomb Raider I ran it on 2 different settings to compare as well, you'll see that. I'm going to edit these benchmarks down a little bit so it's not an age to sit through there, but I'll put on screen the kind of average FPS that they're picking up and so on. So just while watching this benchmark, I thought I'd jump in and say that what this rig was getting on high is fairly comparable to what my rig is getting on the highest graphics setting. So again, it's that idea of this being a little bit of a step down, and you can see the kind of performance change. So after we watched this one, I also did the highest graphics settings, so you can see the difference. I've shortened that one down so it's not quite so long to watch, but basically it gives you a sense of where this one is placed, where this rig is placed in terms of its performance. And the graphics benchmark for Tomb Raider is pretty intensive. It goes through a whole spectrum of scenarios. Now, for those of you who don't know, there is actually a benchmark hidden in Alien Isolation. I say hidden, it's in the launch options. You basically have to just put -benchmark launch, and then it runs when you start the game. But it just basically processes a text file for you, which you can look at for the frame rates, etc. It strangely wasn't very varied on the FPS rate for this. It was just giving me a flat sort of 61.9, so it gives you a rough idea. I mean, you can see by watching this that it's fairly smooth throughout. And this game's a couple of years old, but it's still fairly intense with the amount of lighting and particles and just general effects that's going on. So I thought this was worthwhile to run. It does give you a little insight into some of these kind of single player situations and how it's going to perform graphically. Now, Planet Coaster is not a benchmark as it stands, but I thought this was an interesting one to put in because this was a park which I designed a little while back on some of my live streams. Now, this park eventually got to the point where I had so many objects and rides and different things in there that it was very, very intensive on my existing build. I thought it would be good to see how this rig would perform running that park. So I basically got the save file over, ran it on this rig, and you can see that it actually performs pretty well. Now, I don't have any FPS data for you, but you can judge it for yourself just by looking, because like I say, on my existing build it got to the point where it was, I wouldn't say choppy, but you could tell the frames were dropping. You know, on my existing build, they're probably dropping, I would estimate, into the 40s or something like that. And you can probably just, you know, using your own knowledge, you can probably guesstimate by looking at this right here what kind of frames it's pulling. I doubt it's 60, but I would probably estimate it's somewhere in the 40 to 50 range, something like this, because of, you know, like I say, the size of the park and the amount of assets and objects that I've got in here, because it's all kind of custom. If you know Planet Coaster, you know just how much stuff you can put into a park. So as I say, not a benchmark, not showing you the FPS, but I thought this is just for your own reference, something that I thought was pretty interesting to give you an idea about what it's able to perform and handle. So that's the benchmarks for you, and yeah, I was genuinely, again, really impressed. When it came to Battlefield and Overwatch as well, didn't have benchmarks on those, but what I did was just take an average of the FPS that I was getting there. And again, as with most of the benchmarks, you can basically, for what I would generally be expecting on my other rig, knock off about 10 FPS. And that's my very unscientific estimate of the difference in performance between this i5 1060 spec and my i7 1070 spec. You know, for Battlefield and for Overwatch, it was hitting sort of 65 to 80 FPS most of the time, if not all of the time. My rig for Battlefield, it's probably going to be pushing way beyond that. It's going to be going between 80 to 120 FPS. Overwatch probably, but get about the same. So, you know, it scales, but it does well within the limit of what you'd want it to be at. I think my final verdict on this is that it's actually really changed my view when it comes to starting out with a lower spec, because for sure I have played on lower specs, but not that often. Having sat with this thing for a week, it's certainly not hamstringing you at all. And for sure, if you're going to compare it to a top-end rig with all the bells and whistles, then of course you're going to see a big difference in performance. But that's never something that's going to surprise you, is it? What we're looking at here is a solid build within a budget that delivers. And I think anybody starting out with a PC would be well away to own this. Also, as I said in my other video, I was really surprised to see that CCL's price for basically building this PC and shipping it to you. Their price for buying this PC completely built and delivered to the door with free delivery was the same price, maybe even a little bit less, than what I found on PC Part Picker, which is really surprising because often people say, oh, you know, if you're going to get something pre-built, the trade-off is you're going to have to pay over the odds in order to get that build. And from, you know, what CCL deliver, that seems to not be the case at all. And I guess, like I discussed on the previous video, if you don't really care that much about learning to put the bits together and blah blah blah, then you're really not going to lose anything. But as we discussed before in the other video, with the mid-level builds, you're losing a little bit less in terms of the build spec, etc, etc. Whereas when you come to some of those higher builds, you maybe want to personalize it a little bit more. Maybe it's a bit more important to personalize it. So if you wanted to buy a pre-built PC and you found a spec which was pretty close to what you wanted, and you were able to swap out just one or two elements there, or maybe add in extra RAM or whatever, again, I wouldn't have thought that you would be losing a lot there either. But, you know, at the same time, I think it's always good to know the things that you're working with and sort of have an understanding of them so you can switch them out. It's a personal, subjective thing. So that's basically my full overview, guys. I really enjoyed looking at this little PC build. It was something new, it was something a little bit different to do. Demonically sexy with its red accent finish throughout. I really loved that. Performed, like I say, above my expectations. If you didn't have a huge office or gaming space in your room, this thing's going to fit in there very nicely. I've got another build coming up as well to look at in a few weeks, which is a higher spec one, so it's going to be interesting to see how that compares. As always, guys, big thanks to all of you for watching, and thanks also to everybody who entered. I'm sorry that this wasn't a global giveaway, but as I always say, the more that you guys support me, the more likely I'm going to have opportunities to give back to you guys, and I'm sure that that's going to happen in the future. Back this week with more of the usual content. Thanks for watching as always, and I'll see you guys in the next one.